when I was in the program, the Secret Space program, when I would have time to sit and look at the smart glass pad, there was lots of information that I looked at, and one of them was that there were beings that they found underneath the surface of the earth, usually underneath mounds, burial mounds.
Really?
Indian burial mounds, that were not dead but weren't quite alive. They called them stasis beings. And it turned out that they had used a technology that had been there long prior from this group they called the ancient builder race. Mm. And this technology allowed them to lay down in either a sarcophagus or on top of a stone-looking bed or altar, and it would create a time bubble or well around them to where time on the inside would occur at a slower rate than time on the outside. Hmm. So it didn't put the beings in stasis that a lot of us would think of as in being frozen, but it just changed the way they experience time. And they apparently took some sort of something that caused them to go to sleep, and they would go to their experience, they would probably go to sleep for maybe 20 minutes, and 30,000 years or so would pass by.
So you're saying that a 20-minute rest could skip ahead by 30,000 years?
In their perspective, that's what it would be, taking like a 20-minute nap.
I guess most people would find that really hard to believe, but if you have Einstein relativity in your background, right? Let's say that maybe in the local area, do you think they could be speeding it up to light speed somehow, like the vibration, so that you're just skipping ahead through so much time?
This ancient builder technology is so far beyond even what most of these fourth, fifth density ETs that we're dealing with in some of these meetings that we're having, these conference meetings. They're so far beyond them technologically that some of these beings want to get their hands on this technology. It's multi-dimensional technology. Some of this technology looks like a slab, but the technology is operating on other dimensions. So it took us quite some time to figure out that some of this stuff was actually technology. It was basically magic to us, even up in the 20th century.
Did anybody ever figure out how to use the technology?
Definitely, yeah. It's been figured out. And what was very interesting is that in these smart glass pads, there was this one location that back in the 1800s even, people were going from certain, I guess some people would call them Illuminati groups or whatever, elite groups, were going to visit this one area that had, it was a kind of like a grotto, underground cave, and it went up about 90 feet, and it was covered, they had coated it in some sort of pitch black material, and there was an ancient script language that was around on the inside that they had mostly deciphered, and were handprints, and there were like 3 sarcophagus in kind of a Y-shaped on the floor, and in the middle was a kind of like a box, but with almost like 4x4s on each side, suspending a top and a bottom. And in the middle was like a blue glowing crystal matrix with like spider web connecting it to the 4 corners, suspending it. And this is what was creating the temporal well, or the temporal bubble.
It's a glowing crystal? Mm-hmm. Did it look like a quartz crystal? Did it have a shape? Did it have facets?
Yeah, it had facets. It looked like a quartz crystal.
And you said spider webs, like little fiber optic cable kind of thing?
Could have been fiber optic, but it looked like spider web connected to the tops and the bottoms of it.
And you said there's 4 posts that are holding the spider webs to then the crystal?
Correct. And it was suspended down from there.
And they saw this in the 1800s?
Yes.
Back when there's no electric light?
Back when they had torches. And
that must have been mind-blowing for them at the time.
I would imagine. And
what's in the sarcophagus?
Well, they couldn't see, so they had to build scaffolding up to climb up and look down in. And to look down in, they saw these very tall beings, or large giant humans, with reddish beards, and their skin, because of the pale light, they looked kind of gaunt. But that looked, I think that was because of the lighting.
The blue light.
The blue light.
Was there anything else in the sarcophagus besides the beings?
There, outside of the sarcophagus, there were jars and stuff that we presume had food or something to drink or something in them. But their shoulders were like this, like they were kind of squished into the sarcophagus. So I did not see anything in the sarcophagus.
Do you think they kind of squeezed themselves in because maybe it wasn't originally built for them and they were too tall?
Right. It did not look like it was originally built for them. But what was interesting was there was a long hallway underground that went to this place that had a lot of ancient Native American art and
petroglyphs.
Petroglyphs, and right at the entrance was a kind of a large stone that came out, rounded out before you went this way to go into the grotto, and people had been basically tagging it, writing their names on it. And one of the names that was on it was Abraham Lincoln. And I think Abraham Lincoln made remarks about giants.
He did a speech at the Niagara Falls and said that giants had stood right here before us and had walked on this very land. And he was dead serious about it.
Yeah, he knew for a fact. But the information on this smart glass pad stated that they had finally, to preserve the integrity of the spot, they had to close it down because all of the people going through, they were starting to destroy the petroglyphs and they had to stop all of the elite groups that were going there for kind of a pilgrimage to see these giants that they had built up in their myth as a part of their religion as being their gods or something.
Who else besides Lincoln do you think was on the wall?
That's the only name I recognized.
But they would be government-type people and high-level ranking Masons, that kind of people?
Yeah, they would have to be very elite, well-placed people.
The petroglyphs imply that Native Americans had also found this.
Yes, and the burial mounds at the top, it signified that it was a very holy or special place to the Native Americans.
Can you tell us where this was?
It talked about, it was down at the end of a river, and I'm trying to remember if it was Ohio or Georgia. I think it was Ohio.
Okay. So these beings kind of squunched into the coffin, and they're red-headed, white-skinned giants. Mm-hmm. What do you know about those red-headed, white-skinned giants? Did they only appear in America, and how recently were they around? What do you know about them from your own experience?
Well, from what I read, they've found these stasis beings all over the place.
All over the planet?
All over the planet. A lot in some of the areas, some of the beings they found in stasis were of a different ethnic group that had, I guess, found these technologies and learned to use them.
Hmm.
But these tall, red-headed, red-beard groups were in Europe, in South and North America. And apparently, at one time, before the last ice age, apparently, they had a very large area that they ruled.
Hmm. Were they extraterrestrials that had come here?
I did not see anything that indicated that they were extraterrestrials, but some groups are very convinced that they are extraterrestrials.
What was their level of what were the giants? What was their level of technology on Earth?
Some of them seem to have very advanced metallurgy technology, but there were no real signs of high technology as we would consider technology. But then again, a lot of the stuff that we found that we thought were stones ended up being technology. So, but we didn't see anything that we would recognize as high technology back then that was in the database that I had access to.
Where were they going to get this technology, these stone slabs and stone sarcophagi? How did they procure them?
This technology is littered beneath the Earth's surface. And there were a lot of these locations where they found these stasis beings, and the technology had failed, and the beings were deceased.
Really? So you say it was littered all over the place inside the Earth. I guess if our civilization could be well preserved, right now you'd probably find lots and lots of smartphones. Right. So you think this is something that everybody used all the time?
Well, yeah, and it was obviously built to last. It was made out of what looked like diorite stone, and it did not, I mean, it's lasted for, millions of years. It's very old.
How many sites are you aware of where stasis beings are still in stasis successfully around the world?
There are dozens in the U.S. and across Europe going into Asia.
Dozens?
Many dozens. There were some Asian stasis beings.
Really?
And there were some ancient, like Eastern Indian looking. There were.
And these folks would look more like people we'd see now on Earth?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. From obviously later era that learned how to use this technology.
But you're not going to find the technology on the surface. You're going to have to go into these underground cities?
Right.
Have our people figured out how to switch it on? Do they know how to turn on the stone?
Yes, it's operated on a consciousness level, interactive level. And they finally did, once they realized that this stuff was technology, they did start to learn how to turn it on and figure out what it was.
Do you know if it does anything else besides create a time bubble? Does it have other purposes?
I don't know. And the information that I had at that time, they didn't speculate as to why these beings were putting themselves into stasis.
Has there ever been any ancient builder race people themselves that they thought were still in stasis after all that time?
No. They have no idea what happened to them. I've heard myths, speculations that people said that they went to a higher density, some that they were killed off, some that they left and will come back someday. There's all kinds of, in the programs, there's all kinds of myths about it. But when it comes down to the hard, cold facts, nobody knows.
You mentioned before that when we see one of these underground cities that the ancient builder race created, that there are pyramids.
The images I saw, I didn't see this in person, The images I saw, they had some that were in pyramids, flatter pyramids.
Really?
It looked almost as if it was a crystal pyramid.
You can see right through the pyramid?
Yes, and if some people saw it, they would probably think it was made of crystal, but it's made of high-tech aluminum alloy that's transparent.
How big would those pyramids be?
They were quite a bit smaller than the pyramids of Egypt, and I don't know what purpose they served.
But you said the stone pyramids actually are made of blocks of stone.
Right.
Whereas I guess with these pyramids, they're all one piece?
Yes, they were all one sheet piece, and there were no seams.
Did it have sort of a mother-of-pearl rainbow shimmer on it, or was it really just very clear and sharp?
It looked like crystal.
Wow.
And there were other structures that were, I guess, rectangular, and some of them had sort of A-frame on the top, and then some of the square ones had sort of pyramidal tops to them.
You said that most of the moons, you've said this before, most of the moons in our solar system where they could build anything have it built, right?
Right. There's remnants. And a lot of it's been, like I said, later ET groups have tried to, in the distant past, had tried to wipe away remnants of who they were. And that's how we don't have any idea who they were, because areas to where there was obviously some sort of writing or petroglyphs or something had been wiped clean.
But the technology of these time bubble creating slabs, that is consistent not just under the Earth, but in these other sites that you find in the moons as well?
I have not heard anything about that type of technology found anywhere other than associated with the stasis beings.
Do these other ancient builder race sites in the moons in our solar system have these similar transparent aluminum pyramids and that kind of stuff in them?
Structures, made of the same materials.
But are they pyramids as well?
There are, but they're mostly, there's a lot of them that are towers that are, there are a lot of them that are like towers and stuff like that are twisted and over, like there's been some sort of concussion wave or something happened.
In a variety of these locations.
Yeah, they're not really intact like they were below the ground.
Like some sort of massive military strike took place.
Or natural cataclysm, something.
Right, okay. Wouldn't there be a temptation for people to want to get to these beings and pull them out of stasis?
Well, the groups that were in charge saw them as some sort of spiritual gods or something like that, so they left them alone. But when it comes down to it, that's all the knowledge I have about them, is that they were in stasis and nobody knows why, and that some of them have perished, and they're using the ancient builder technology.
I think you had said to me something about the time bubble and what happens if you try to go into the time bubble.
Yes, there was some other technology that that had time bubbles around it. There had been people that had tried to enter in, and they froze in time. And there were people from other time frames that I read about in the smart glass pad that were also trapped in these time wells. So they're not something you want to go charging into.
What would be the incentive, you think, for these people to want to wake up now? What is it that they are expecting is going to happen that's so cool in our time?
Well, this huge vibratory change in our solar system. This change, supposedly we're graduating from one density to another. We're in transition. So if this is true and these beings are awakening and they set themselves to wake up during this time period, I could only speculate that they wanted to be a part of that.
How do you explain a machine that has no moving parts? It doesn't, you say it just looks like diorite, which is black granite.
We couldn't explain it for quite some time. It basically was magic, but it has parts that were working on a multi-dimensional level. You know, in our dimension, it just looks like a piece of stone, but it has parts that are drawing energy or maybe even moving or working in other dimensions that we're not fully aware of.
You said that there have not been any of these technologies found anywhere else except inside the Earth.
I was talking about the stasis gravity well. There have been there's been technologies found all over the solar system.
Are there technologies that could create these time bubbles that have been found in other places?
The only thing I've read mentioned about that was found in caves and underground on the Earth.
How many different types of beings have been found in stasis? Would that include extraterrestrials that just showed up here and not just people from Earth and giants?
I have just heard about the ones that I've mentioned. I've just read about the ones that I've mentioned.
If this technology is so peculiar, is it something that a lot of other beings have developed, or is it sort of unusual even for the average intelligent civilization that's been dealing with our space program?
I don't know what other civilizations have developed. I know that they're very interested in this technology, and for a while they were doing a lot of trade with us before we knew what it was to get it from us.
Really?
We've been doing a lot of expeditions to get this, and finally we were like, why do they want these stones? Why do they want these relics so much? And then after we became sophisticated enough in our way of thinking and realized that it was a technology, we stopped trading it.
So you say that there's huge amounts of these cities that are unexplored. So there's obviously going to still be a lot more of these left behind when we go in there.
True.
What do you think we could do with a time-changing technology like that? What's the ultimate... If humanity comes into possession of these, what do you think we could end up doing with a technology like that that could be beneficial?
That I wouldn't want to speculate. I really don't know.
Are there other ways that we have to manipulate time?
Yeah, we have certain types of spacecraft that use temporal drives in them that they've put buffers on to make sure that people don't travel back and forth in time.
What is a temporal drive?
It is a way of traveling great distances in space, time, without having to deal with traveling through the natural portal system that a lot of other civilizations use, the galactic web.
So you sent me a couple links to some videos that you claim may actually be stasis beings?
Correct, yes. These were images, there were two different videos. One was of a stasis being in a chamber that had apparently failed and the stasis being had perished, and the other was of a stasis being still in stasis that was in the process of being revived, I am told.
What are we going to see here with this first stasis being?
The first one we're going to see is the one of the failed stasis chamber and the one where the stasis being had perished.
Okay, so let's check that out now. So what's up with the goldfish on his chest that's got the Sumerian cuneiform writing on it? Is there a connection to Sumerian somehow, you think?
Yeah, there seems to be, going back into the distant past, a steady progression from a root tongue or a root language that was a kind of a proto-ancient Sumerian language that has popped up in a very few places in modern archaeology.
Is it normal for these stasis beings to be buried with gold iconography like this, gold artifacts?
Not all of them, no.
All right, so now let's check out the second video. In this one, it's different because there's no coins over his eyes. He's got a really long beard. So what are people about to see in this video? Do you think this guy actually is in stasis, or do you think this is another failed one?
This appears, if it is indeed genuine, that they're in the process of coming out of stasis, like they're being revived.
So one of the things that struck me about this was the Egyptian, clearly Egyptian female head on that golden plate that's in there. And then this very strange little statue of this guy that has like two snakes coming up from the sides, almost like something out of Hinduism. So it's like we're seeing different religions being blended. And when you look at the newspaper with the Arabic on it, there's some Sumerian cuneiform on the gold next to that. So we've got Hindu, Egyptian, and Sumerian all represented in this one guy.
It's not uncommon, and there have been some cave-type structures that were once inhabited by these tall, red-headed, red-bearded beings that are very tall, that especially inhabited North America a long time ago. And there have been artifacts of crossover civilizations been found.
That's very significant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these videos were quite fascinating, and I'm glad that you found them and sent them to me. They all had Russian titles on them, but they're obviously not from Russia. It's Middle Eastern, most likely Turkey, and somewhere maybe Egypt.
Right. Like I said, these have been found across the world.
Well, this has been a very fascinating subject. I'm your host, David Wilcock, and we're here because you need to know the truth. Thank you for watching.
you.